Hey everyone, this is Sean Garrett, founding attorney of Garrett PLC and founder of the Legal Eagle podcast. My goal with this podcast, as you know, isn't to brain dump complex business law and tax concepts. Instead, I want to highlight some of the entrepreneurs and business leaders in the communities that I serve. I'm licensed to practice law in North Carolina, South Carolina, Illinois, Missouri. So I'm very excited to bring these stories from Charlotte, Greenville, Chicago, and St. Louis. Today we have Jimmy Coleman. Jimmy has a few different endeavors and businesses that he's tied to, but the one that I became most familiar with him through is Lead Baller. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Happy to see you, man.
Yeah, definitely. You and I have a pretty close personal and professional relationship, so this is a podcast I've been looking forward to.
Joint birthday parties, not for ourselves, but for our boys a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Same hospital, same day, a couple hours apart. It's an amazing story. Let's start at the very beginning. Not at birth, but wherever you want to take us to. Tell us about Jimmy. Who is Jimmy Coleman?
All right. Yes. So let's start with really strong in my faith, and we have our third baby that could show up today, could be tomorrow. We're a couple days late, 3 days late now. So Cassius was 5 days late. So Lucius was 8 days early. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So that's going down. And then I have some fun personal aspirations to be a pro athlete and in the sport of ultra, like endurance running. I own Lead Baller. Summarize that in a 7-figure marketing company. And then, there are some other things that are coming into play here. So we'll see how that shakes up. So,
yeah, definitely.
Where Sean, as my attorney, knows all about them.
Of course. The theme for today, I wouldn't be an attorney if I wasn't organized, but we are going to talk about 4 concepts: faith, family, business, and then sports. You and I are dialed in on the athleticism, but you touch on the fact that you're a man of God. What does that mean to you? Let's dive into that.
Yeah, I think a few years ago it started meaning. It really had to mean something for me because, we're given these things by if our family grew up with faith, then you want to make your parents proud and you want to hold on to that. If you're then surrounding yourself with friends that have the same values and things, to end up changing that set of values is really kind of inconvenient, right? And you have to, if you were to let go of those values, then so it's just not a good, but that's not by itself a good reason to maybe hold on to those values, I think. And so when my son was born 3 years ago, I started asking a lot of the why questions because I know that they were going to be asked to me. I also knew that there is some level of foundation of truth that I had to, feed my child of what's right and wrong. And I didn't want to just hand that over because it was what was convenient for me. I wanted it to be truly intentional. So started asking the big questions like, is God real? And I was worried that as I looked into the logical debates around that conversation, that logic would lead me away from God, there being a creator, right? And I was pleasantly surprised to see that it's really it requires a lot more faith to for accidents to be the product of for us to be the product of not just a lot of accidents, but like essentially it's a bigger miracle of accidents than someone creating us. It's just kind of more common sense the more you look into it. But from there, the crucifixion is the biggest event in history, essentially, if it happened. With the resurrection. The resurrection happened, then Christianity is real. Like God is either, Jesus is either a liar, lunatic, or Lord. If it didn't happen, then the biggest religion on the planet is false. So like that's a good shortcut if you want to look into it. And then from there, I just started developing a closer relationship personally with God, and which has led me to some days I'll go to mass on a daily basis, and
Mm-hmm.
constantly finding ways to express love and gratitude towards God. And it's also my foundation for what's right and wrong, as I said before. And by the way, if there is no God, then we're all just kind of, there are no rules, really. There's no moral objectivity. There's no human rights. There's no all these things that people are protesting for if God doesn't exist. So,
Yeah.
yeah, long
No, it's
answer,
solid.
simple question.
No,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. I remember I was young when I learned the definition to absolute truth. And I was raised in the church. I think you know a bit of my story, but um, when I was going through middle school, high school, and college, it was foreign to me that people weren't Christians. It was foreign to me that people didn't think the way that I thought, and that was a lot of my naivety, my me being naive, me being sheltered. And so when I met people that said, you know, there is no absolute truth, there is a maybe in the world, I was like, that's just not that's not the way I live. And one of the biggest impacts that you've had on me and my family has been your conviction. I don't name drop you. I try to keep attorney-client privilege very sacred. But when I talk about the conviction that you have in your business, that's tremendous to me. You know, you and again, I'll keep it very high level, but you and I have had decisions where, you know, I've told you what the law says, and you've said, yeah, but I want to do it this way because these are my values and this is what's right. Um, you know, I don't know if you have any words for how you wake up in the morning and just say, I'm going to be convicted. I'm going to stand by my conviction no matter what. You know, as a Christian myself, you know, it's no surprise to anyone that I'm a Christian, but you challenge me to stand by my convictions in everything. And it's not that that I don't stand by my convictions. It's that the level that you take it to, I'm just so impressed by.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I can speak to some of that. Some of it is simple math. Eternity is much longer than my lifetime. And so if I'm making decisions that are short-sighted to help me get ahead in things that really would only matter in my lifetime, then that's bad math, right? So I want to make sure that what I'm putting value in are things that will matter more in eternity. And if so, which against maybe even some Christians here that I know that I would have heard that at some point and been like, oh man, I guess he really does believe. Like, yeah, because there are some times where the rubber hits the road and it's not so convenient to be Christian anymore, you know? Um,
Yeah.
Other things that makes me think of, my wife is reading a book right now from, there's a saint, her name is Saint Gemma, and she has a diary that she like allowed people to read at, you know,
Mm.
towards the end of her life. And in this diary, like Morgan's saying that she's confessing some of her sins, and to Morgan, like these sins are these even sins? But it's one of those things where like the more pure that you become, the more awareness you have of the things that you're doing that are not aligned with God. Like when you enter into heaven, at that point, there's been some level of purification that you've gone through um, uh, to be more like Christ, essentially, right? And to like be
Mm-hmm.
ready for heaven. Um, and so yeah, the closer you get to that in your lifetime, like the more you can see some of these things. And the other piece is that the burden that I have is I do have a hard time sleeping at night if I've done something wrong to someone. And even if
Yeah.
they don't think that I have, but I think that I might have or something like that. And it is a burden that I carry, but I'm sure I do have faith that it'll work out for me.
Definitely. No, I love that. I know your story and how you got started. Whenever you want to share about the drive it took to get Lead Baller off the ground, whether you want to go back to the sales days, whether you want to talk about, you know, the entity where you got the idea from, I'd love to hear about, you know, your coming of age story.
Well, no, I remember you starting your own law practice and you talking to me about that, and you were so calculated, and I was actually thinking about that the other day. So like I certainly was not, and something I'll tend to do sometimes, and it has its pros and cons, is just throw myself into situations that I got to climb out of. and what happens in that process is sometimes some really cool badass things will happen, and then also some failures as well. And so I do want to make sure that some lessons I'm learning is that moving forward, because you can drag other people into that mess, and I don't want to do that, obviously. So for the sake of other people, and then if you're constantly stressed out, then you're not able to serve people as good. You don't have as much capacity to give, and so I am actually trying to learn some more of that from you, of because you were very calculated, and I've met other people that are that way too, where before they started a business, like they made an actual business plan or something.
What's
So
that, right?
I think, for me, dude, I really didn't know what it would be a year after I started it. And then even in the first few months, I was so I actually did have a little bit of fear. I started it, like I quit my job, but for the first few months, I was so fearful about putting something out there for people to buy, until I ran out of room on my credit card and whatever else, and I had to start making some sales and testing the water. So yeah, when I started the company, this was after I had a few jobs where I was doing a really good job at doing business development and sales, and my tactics were kind of unique for business development, and so started speaking at places even as I'm employed, and people would reach out, and eventually they said, there was, hey, this advice you gave is way better than some advice I paid a lot of money for. And that gave me some encouragement to start selling it to people. Again, I didn't know what that looked like exactly, and so I just started putting it out there and testing it, and I do learn from trial and error a little bit. So it is good that there's a little bit of that, like, hey, let's just test the waters and see what happens. So
Yeah, no, I love that. I was talking to someone yesterday, and we were talking about the different stages and the different levels of comfort, kind of like you were talking about, in terms of calculation. And yesterday we were talking about analytics. My wife is so much more analytical than I am. And so I kind of consider myself not to be as analytical, but I'm much more analytical than the next person. And when it comes to business, with our authentic selves, we just have to be who we are. I think that no matter where you and I go, you tend to know at least 7 or 8 people wherever we are. And I think that your authentic self comes out in everything you do, whether it's sales, whether it's business, whether it's that conviction. So that's pretty awesome. Um, yeah, so I know you probably don't know too much about the podcast. I haven't dropped any episodes yet, but the name is the Legal Eagle Podcast. I'm a big golfer. In the golf world, par for the course, it's adequate. Now, men like you and me, we are not okay with adequate. We like birdies. We like one under par. We like being a little bit better than ourselves the next day. And then once we start shooting birdies and we, get comfortable with great, we start shooting for exceptional, and that's eagles. So eagles are exceptional. What does exceptional look like in Jimmy's life on a day to day basis?
what was it? GK Chesterton said something that I think if I heard it like 5 years ago, I would have like just vomited. But now I see the beauty in it. He said something about there's nothing more extraordinary than an an ordinary man with his ordinary wife and his ordinary family, something like that. And because I'm really challenged by that. When I became a father, I was put in a place where there's less time and opportunity to be a yes man, to say yes to everybody, and to go to every event, and um, to win at some of the things that I wanted to win at, or do the things that were necessary in order for me to that I knew as far as how to win those things. My ego is wrapped into how successful my business was and stuff, and but again, yeah, this is what this refinement process is. So it's painful. It's like sometimes our ego is like and like shedding it off is like cutting off a limb. It's really spiritually a painful process and everything. So um so I had to shed off some of these just worldly desires that I had. Still my responsibility as a father, husband, to provide for my family. So, but like basically put that in its place. It has a value, but you know what the devil does is the devil takes things that are inherently beautiful and good and perverts them. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think, man, if people have the right definition of success, you and I both know people that no matter whatever they're doing, like whatever they call success, they're going to achieve it. So pointing that energy and that focus in the right direction is so important. That's why that's a good question, because yeah, what are people essentially calling extraordinary? What are people calling success? And you know, yeah, at the end of the day, as a husband, um, my responsibility is like, all right, I have a responsibility on the souls of my family, and my soul and the souls of my family. So all the decisions I make, I need to make sure that I make those decisions with those things in mind. Um, and then and then there's the other responsibilities, but like that one is a far first priority, and so that impacts where you live, your work schedule. It just impacts everything. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, success, extraordinary, looks like maintain that first responsibility of like leading souls to heaven, essentially.
Love that.
And when you genuinely believe that, it is hard to like. I know this isn't a specifically a faith based podcast or anything like that. It's just the truth. And so you don't put the truth in a box over here, right? Like if God created all this, like you don't just put God in a box, then go back to pretending that it doesn't exist. He's weaved into every part of life. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a couple minutes left. I'm going to be respectful of your time. I want to talk about one of the bigger parts of our relationship, running. You mentioned wanting to be a professional athlete. You've drugged me to some crazy things. I ran for a handful of hours with you while you were running a 24-hour race. You did this twice. I only ran with you one time, helped pace you. We ran through the mountains of North Carolina from Virginia to Asheville on a 200-mile trek on the Blue Ridge Relay. 12 hours into a 24-hour race. What's going through your head? What's getting you to hour 13, 14, 15?
Yeah, by the way, you're one of my guys. If I need to like recruit someone to do something stupid with me, you're one of my suckers that I'll hit up. And, you're on my short list.
Always, always.
Yeah. So okay, 12 hours into a 24-hour race, I've always said that whether it's a mile or 100 miles, the second, no, really, it's the second third is the hardest. Like the middle third is really the hardest, because at that point, especially in a 100-mile race, you've run a lot, or it was a 24-hour, did 103.5. So I'm a lot of miles in at that point, and I still have a long way to go. so
Yeah, definitely.
so might not be the highlight of my mentality at that point, because you go through this roller coaster of, man, I'm a badass, or thank you God, I'm so grateful to have the legs and lungs to do this, or so grateful for the family support that I have to be able to do this. You go through that, but then also like what are you even doing this for? Like, yeah, just really just you get like just some of the lowest lows of just feeling like the biggest idiot on the planet too, and the biggest wimp, and I don't know, all these things. So at the actual 12-hour mark, I'm not sure which one of those things it is. It's funny how the tide, like the you can just feel a breeze all of a sudden, and then things are good, or you find there's a runner that you're about to pass that you finally found, and now you're feeling it again. Or a big one for me, one of my more recent ones is 50 miles. once it got down to single digits, I just became an animal. I like channeled my inner David Goggins and was just like, screw the pain, like let's go, like this is. And but really, like a few miles before that, I was really hating it. So
Yeah, yeah,
it goes in all the directions. It's just very extreme, one way or the other.
yeah. That's entrepreneurship, man. That is athleticism. It's all of it. I feel like my life since starting this business has been, whether it's working out, pushing myself to the limit, or my limits, not the limit, because all of our limits are different. Your limits are out here, my limits are in here. But even with entrepreneurship, I land a big client, and that high is high. It feels phenomenal. When I landed a big client and I was on someone else's payroll, my boss felt phenomenal. He's cashing those checks. He's loving it. And my distance is 26, so half of your 50 miles. I like running these marathons, and my 12th hour is 18 miles in. The last 8 miles that's going to take me 12 hours mentally to do. I feel like I'm halfway at 18 miles. My answer to that question is, I try to just zone out. The pain is temporary. The miles are short. They're going to be gone tomorrow, and just trying to hone in on the task at hand.
What's
I do
cool
that
about
with work too.
running is very simple. It's just not easy,
Agreed.
so it's putting one foot in front of the other. And that is kind of where I thrive. If in business, if I can simplify business so that it's hard, but it is simple, then I can usually win. But when it gets too complex, like it's like I used to do a lot of CrossFit. I hated all the Olympic lifts because they're so technical.
Mm.
I couldn't just like be a bull in a china shop. I kind of am a bull in a china shop with most things. I'm not very technical, um, so yeah, if running is simple but it's not easy, especially if it's a marathon, 50 miles, 100 miles, whatever it is, that is what you kind of have to tell yourself is like you really do have a choice of whether you're just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then, you eventually just stop thinking about it. You just go into like the zombie mode. I know,
Yeah,
I don't think I
yeah,
felt that halfway, but certainly 75 miles into that one, I felt like, all right, just zombie, just one foot in front of the other, just go and not thinking. And I actually do remember, speaking of David Goggins, like he said something about not like he would steal in his book. He talked about stealing soul. I'm not like a David Goggins fanboy anyway, but this is a good takeaway. He talked about like stealing souls, and one of the ways he would do that is people would keep trying to like make his life difficult, and he would not let them see him struggle. He
mm.
would have his chest out high, and like he would just like intentionally really kick ass at that thing so that so they didn't get the benefit of seeing him struggle doing it. And so that's the other thing that what's funny is I thought that that's how I looked in the last like 15 miles of the 100-mile thing. And then
Yeah,
I came back to that same race. I was part of a team this past year, and they're like, "Oh yeah, some guy he broke the record. He did the 103 or something. He did over 100 miles." And they were like, "Yeah, but he looked rough. He looked really bad." And they didn't know that it was me.
that's amazing. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's so cool. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up. One more thing I want to say: if anyone's listening, it's something workout I've been trying recently. Planks. Planks are one of those workouts like Jimmy and I are talking about when it comes to pain being temporary, and it's all mental. Yeah, planks hurt a bit, but I felt like I was able to do. I feel like my hump in planks is me getting over my boredom, which is kind of crazy because you're kind of just laying there,
It's
and when
simple
you're
but
looking
not
down,
easy.
exactly, simple but not easy. A
Yep.
minute in, I'm like, man, I got to go check my email. But it's a really good workout for me, both mentally and physically. So, Jimmy Coleman, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you, sir. If anyone wants to find you, what's the best place for them to contact you?
Try me on LinkedIn, Jimmy Coleman. That'll be fun.
Solid. All right, brother. Hey, thanks for being on here.
Thanks, dude. Talk soon. See you,
Yep.
man.
See ya.